Hello everyone, our today's guest is Karthik. He is the co-founder and CEO of Envision, which enables blind and visually impaired people to have access to visual information. And that's pretty cool, that's really cool. Karthik been recently really all over the news and everywhere. Has close ties to the Dutch prince. Yeah, just a great guy in general and with a great mission. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
We go for classics. We start off with your origins. What was your family like? Are your parents also like business people or?
Yeah, so like my family, I think have been very enterprising. Your family, like, or at least that's sort of the attitude that they have both had a lot. So like my father was somebody who didn't have a lot of education. So he came from a family of 6 people, and he was like the eldest, son. So he had to start earning like very early in his life to be able to take care of, like his family. So he was 16 or something where he stopped his education and just started to work. But he was always like super intelligent, so he literally started his life by digging trenches when people had to do constructions of these transmission towers where electricity passes through. Mm-hmm. So he literally started like from the bottom. And then, but with this, sheer sort of perseverance, he was able to overcome every obstacle. And when he ended like his career, he was like a vice president of the company, which was, like a very international company. So for me, that's always been very inspirational, where I could, see that it's not about the education or a degree that matters, but it's about intelligence and that attitude for execution. I think that's something that I was able to sort of, observe, my dad do a lot, and I think that's always been something that sort of inside me instigated an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think it's the same with my mom. Like even though she was not out there digging holes, I don't think I've ever seen my mom just stay at home and just be by herself. Like she's always trying to sort of like learn something else. She's trying to teach new things. So she's is either teaching like yoga, or like she's teaching like Hindi to people. There's always something that she's doing. So it's always been, so it was always being at a house where just doing a nothing was not an option. Like you always need to be out there going for something. So I think that's the kind of environment that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. And were you the only child of the family, or were there more?
No, I have an elder brother. He was, or at least when we were growing up, he was the more like a creative one in the family. So he was the artist, and he will paint and stuff like that. So I used to give him a hard time at school, because all the teachers would be like, like you are doing well in school, but this guy is not. But he had a lot of creative outlets, which I think always aspired to.
After school, you started a bachelor's with industrial engineering, which I think more or less kind of related to design as well, and like also creative thinking a bit.
In a sense, but I think not entirely. Like it's not as creative as design, which is what I afterwards went on to like to pursue. I think I remember after school in India, after you finish your school, you need to make a choice of which is the thing you want to do as your bachelor's, and I had a really hard time figuring out what is it that I actually want. But something I think I knew deep inside me was that I always was good at problem solving. I think that's, or at least that's what I got more excited from. Like if there is some problem, and if there is a mathematical solution to it, or if there is a physical solution to it, I think that's something that really excited me. So I just started really looking at which are the pathways where your problem solving is at the heart of it. And industrial engineering was like one of those, where it's basically you sort of using statistics and optimization algorithms to solve a problem. But yeah, once I got there, I found that it was not really as like rosy as I thought it would be, because you're really trying to. So industrial engineering was all about optimizing something that's already been built, right? So you have a factory, or you have some sort of a machinery already in place, and then how do you optimize it? How do you optimize the best a route something should take? How do you optimize the best manufacturing a process that is already in place? So it was always about optimizing something, which is a type of problem solving. Part that I'm most excited about is when you need to build something like new, And I think for me, that's when the whole aspect of your design became a lot more interesting, because it's not about just optimizing what already exists, but solving a problem that there isn't a solution for, and then you have to build a solution for it from scratch. And I think that's when I sort of understood that industrial engineering is not what I want to do. So that was like 4 years, so that was the outcome of the 4 years of my bachelor's. But I think that's still a good outcome, because at least after that I had the clarity of exactly what is it that I want to do. So it was just design is what I was interested in. I remember I was in sort of the final years of my engineering, and I saw this documentary called Objectified. It's a really fascinating documentary. It's about industrial design and how stuff is made. So they talk about how people make a chair and stuff like that. I think that's for me was a trigger saying that, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to build something from scratch. And I remember then I immediately, almost within a span of a week, I went down this industrial design as a rabbit hole. And by the end of it, I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to be. But then I'm like, okay, but now what? I cannot just become a designer. So I started to look at what is it that you need to become a designer. So for me, the next logical thing was, okay, if I do a master's in industrial design, that's probably the way to do it. So I just started to look at all the universities that you need to apply to. And I found that all of these universities always ask for a portfolio of your work if you want to apply to a design study. And I had just finished 4 years of engineering. I didn't have a portfolio of anything. So I just had a bunch of engineering reports. And so I was at that point both so happy at the fact that I knew exactly what I want to do, but also sad because but I don't have what it takes to enroll in a course to do this. So for me, that was the point where I'm like, okay, I need to build a portfolio. That's the next thing. So I just really started to look for ways that I can build my portfolio. So I just started applying to all the design studios in India, saying that, hey, can I work with you, and I will build my portfolio when I'm working with you. But all the design studios ask for a portfolio. So I went to a bunch of interviews and a whole bunch of them, until there was this one guy who said, okay, I'll take a chance on you. So that was for me, I think that lucky break, where this guy who he took a chance on me. His name was Shahnawaz. He became a mentor to me. Then he sort of took me in his wings for a year and a half. And in that span, I was able to build a portfolio enough to apply to a university.
And that university was the TU Delft here in the Netherlands.
Yes.
It's a pretty tough one, because it's the best one.
Yeah. So for me, that was the thing. If I want to do it, I need to do it where it's worth it. So I really picked a few of the top universities. I know I wanted to come to Europe, because I felt like the way design a language is taught here, I think is is a kind of design that I wanted to aspire to. So I really just applied to the top 5 schools in Europe. So I was fortunate that I was able to get into Delft. What they do is, because during the 2-year masters you actually solve so many problems in form of a project, that you in yourself build a confidence that, okay, I can now solve a problem because I've solved 4 problems in the past, and I've come up with a solution that works. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me was from the whole masters as a course, is the confidence boost. Before I had a piece of paper which said I'm a designer, I think I also was able to solve problems, but then I just didn't have the confidence that the solution that I'm putting forth is the best solutions, because I used to internally feel that I'm not a designer yet. That confidence, I think, was something that I was able to sort of get. And I think if you think about it, it's all about your confidence doing anything, right? Even in entrepreneurship, that you probably know, it's always about that you fake it till you make it. So if you have the confidence that something will go through, and I think in 90% of the cases, it's all about having that confidence to do it.
But before we jump into the whole, I guess, that origin story of the Envision, what kind of made you love the whole combination of design and AI, because it's something like in a way different, but also kind of like strange to combine.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of factors that have fascinated. So of course, like I've told you, the aspect that fascinates me about your design itself. But AI, artificial intelligence, has been this word that has been sort of thrown around for like a long time. It's not a new concept at all. Most of sci-fi is just about AI, but it's always been fascinating in terms of understanding what is human intelligence. Because if you think a baby is not intelligent, but then at some point you're like, okay, now you're an intelligent human being. So for me, that whole aspect of what is intelligence has been very fascinating. And I think the way to understand what is intelligence is if you are able to recreate intelligence. So is intelligence just code? Is it just a complex code that somebody has written out saying that, okay, this is how intelligence will evolve and that's how it's happening? Or is there something that's much more divine than that to intelligence? So for me, these deep sort of all the questions were always what is fascinating, and I think that's when I started going into the depths of sort of what AI can do. And I think when I was doing that, I think that's when the whole deep learning as a field was becoming very fascinating. So for the longest time, you only had like machine learning. But this deep learning was a new aspect of machine learning, where they were actually using neural algorithms to build AI, which means they were actually attempting to replicate how your brain is processing things to build it. For example, like earlier, like if when people used to build AI and they have to have an AI recognize a ball, right? For example, they will sort of feed the AI information about the ball, where they say, okay, a ball is something spherical, a ball is something that has stripes in it, a ball is something. So they will teach the AI what is a ball, and then the AI then will be able to detect a ball. So that's how the old AI used to function. But then this new fascinating aspect of AI, which only has been around for the last 5 to 6 years, is where you don't teach AI what a ball is. You just show AI 100 images of a ball, and you let the AI sort of figure out what it thinks is a ball. So it'll just look at 100 images, and then it will understand, okay, I think I know it's the edges, it's the contrast, it's the shape. Like the AI will do its own understanding of it, and then when you show it like a ball, it will be able to recognize it much more accurately, because you didn't feed the information. The AI was able to extract it by itself, because that's exactly how humans operate, right? Like like if you have to learn what a ball is, you will not say, okay, a ball is a spherical object, circle. Like you will just know by looking at 100 pictures of a ball that this is a ball. A bit more complicated example would be maybe a cat, right? Like what a cat looks like, irrespective of whether it's a big cat, fat cat, thin cat. You instinctively know something is a cat or not, because you have seen 100 cats in like a lifetime. At no point did you make a mental note that, okay, a cat has 2 ears, it has whiskers. You never did that, because that's not how human sort of all your mind works. It just sees 100 things, and it makes a mental model of this is what this thing is like. And that's basically what is now happening with AI, where it's no longer about feeding specific information. It's just let the AI figure out exactly what makes that thing, which for me was very fascinating, because of course these algorithms have been around for a while, but the problem was twofold. One was that until recently we didn't have access to data, which is very important for this AI to learn, right? So for an AI to be able to recognize a cat, it needs 100,000 or more images of a cat if you want the accuracy to be really good. But earlier, if you want to find 100,000 images of a cat, it was very difficult. But now if you want to find 100,000 images of a cat, you go to Instagram, just do hashtag cats, you have 1 million images of a cat. So now, because of your smartphones, your data has become abundantly available, which was not the case earlier. So if all of this data now can be used to teach AI stuff. So now if an AI has to learn what's a cat, like people don't have to look for images of cat. It's very easily and very abundantly available. And at the same time, the another thing, because of Moore's law, the processors have become faster and faster. So earlier, what would need like a like an array of like GPUs for you to compute, you can now do it on your phone. So the processing power that is needed to build such complex AI is now becoming more and more accessible. So I think it's a combination of these two things is the reason why AI has now become like the hot thing, because now it's become like incredibly more accessible to people. And I think that's when it starts to get fascinating, because you can just build sort of all layers on top of this, and the applications of it becomes boundless. And I think it becomes boundless in a way where it can automate a whole bunch of things that humans are currently doing, which they don't have to.
So at that point in life, it was, I guess, partly that your fascination about the topic, but also partly you were kind of feeling that you were in the right time in the right place as well, with all the factors being just right in front of you.
Yeah.
So I guess at that point you were thinking that this is it, I'm gonna work on this, either in a company or start my own startup.
I think deep down I always just knew I want to start my own company at some point. But I think I've always had excuses to give myself that I don't want to start it. So I know, because so like my co-founder and I, we like know each other since like sort of like bachelor days, right? We used to always talk about having a startup together, and we will always aspire to Steve Jobs and all of these people, and we'll just watch their talks on loop, and we knew that that's what we aspire to. But so we never had the balls to do it, because it takes a real sort of the courage to take the risk, right? So I always had excuses. After I did my like engineering, I'm like, okay, I think I need more experience before I start something, so I'm gonna go do a job. And then once you have a job, you're like, okay, I think I need a master's degree so that I can actually be a professional before I start something. Then you get a master's degree, and towards the end of my master's degree, I again had a new excuse. I'm like, okay, I think I need a bit more experience before I start my company, because then I know how things work. But then I think that's when like a voice inside me said, like, stop, like, there will always be a reason not to take the risk. You'll always have some excuse that you can give because of this you didn't start. But yeah, like if you do ever have to start, it's always going to be a leap of your faith. It's never going to be ideal conditions for you to start. So if you do have to take a leap of faith at some point, you might as well just take it now. So I think that's when I'm like, okay, I really want to build a company. And yeah, I think it was also the combination was right. Like I was very fascinated with AI. I was very fascinated with what sort of like design can do, and I could see very meaningful applications of AI that can improve the lives of people as of now. It's not something in the distant future. We can start making impact starting today. And for me, that was very fascinating.
It was still quite broad, the topic itself. Like it was not clear, like I'm gonna do the visual impairment.
Yeah.
What was the click? Was it the presentation you gave in India?
Yeah, so that was one of like of sort of like a trigger points. Definitely. So when I was in India and I was giving this talk to a school for the blind, and there were a bunch of like blind kids, and they were just looking to understand what is design. And I went into the whole thing about how design is solving a problem. And then I asked them a question, okay, if you guys have to solve a problem tomorrow, what will you do? And then all the kids in the room were like, I want to be more independent, like I want to go to school on my own, I want to hang out with my friends, like for me, just being independent is something that I really, really want to do. And it was like such a strong emotion they all wanted to experience. And that really stuck with me, that the whole interaction, because I felt like, hey, I'm supposed to be a designer, somebody who is just like solving problems. Why am I not doing something about it? So I really picked that as my sort of like research for my thesis. I'm like, okay, I want to understand what is independence for blind and visually impaired people. Like, what do they mean when they say the word independence? And that's when I sort of unfurled that thread by doing more of like research and interviews and observations. Is that for a lot of them, independence always meant access to information. And because we live in a visual world, we've built stuff in a visual way. Their inability to access that information is what is causing dependencies in their life. And I believe that dependency could be reduced if that visual information could be made accessible. And I saw that AI stage at which it is right now can do that. It cannot fully replace your eyes as of yet, but it can do enough to give you enough information of what's around you, so that you can be a bit more independent than what you're today. So that's how I started this whole thing.
How were you able to convince your partner in crime, the Karthik?
I think it was like a slow, burn. I think it was not that he needed, convincing, but I think we started out, we were both very uncertain as to what this thing is gonna be, right? Because this was still my thesis. I was still a, a student, and he had a really high-paying job in Bangalore, right? Like a software engineer in Bangalore is like very high, in demand kind of a role. So. But then he and me, we always used to work on sort of other projects together and stuff. So I said, hey, I'm trying to do this. I know you do a lot of AI stuff. Can you help me to build your prototypes? Just to experiment with like what's possible with AI, specifically with image recognition and stuff like that. So he just started helping me as because this was supposed to be a project, right? We'll just build an app, we'll build a prototype, we'll show it around, and that was sort of like how we got into it. There was no serious commitment, but I think it just got increasingly exciting with every iteration of the app. When we had the very first version, it was like super basic. Like it'll say this is a plate, this is a cup, like very basic stuff, which was very fascinating that it can do that. But then when we took it to the users, they were like, yeah, it's nice that there is a cup, but then it doesn't help me in any ways because probably I'm the one who put the cup there. So it it's cool, but it doesn't help. So then we started asking them questions. Okay, which information that you would find helpful? If I say like it's your cup, is that helpful? If I say it's like a red cup, is that helpful? Then we started to sort of including insights from the users and then iterating on the app on top of that. And I think towards the end of my thesis, we had reached a point where we had a prototype of the app, which when I started just showing around to people, they were like very, very fascinated by it. They were like, this is something that's actually amazing, and it's something that I actually want to use every day, and something that I'm okay to pay for. So I think it was at that point we both sort of got that indication that okay, we should start this because there is this is what we've always wanted to do, right? To be at the cutting edge of technology, to be able to help people with something that we built. So we both kind of like knew that this is something that we want to do. But yeah, like it was still a lot of uncertainty, right? Like we didn't know how do we get funded for it. We didn't know if this will ever make sort of like revenue, if it will make enough revenue for both of us to be able to sustain ourselves. There were a whole bunch of uncertainty and a lot more for him because I was already here. I was a student, so I sort of had a better understanding. But he had just gotten sort of like married. It was like 2-3 months after his marriage, and I'm like, hey, do you want to start this company together? So there was a lot more, I think, of a decision making on him. But he gave me confidence when he's like, okay, I'm just going to book a flight. I'll come there. We'll apply to an incubator together and we'll see how it goes. So he flew out 3 months after his marriage. His wife is very upset with me for that. Then he came here, and then we just applied to Yes Delft incubator, and they were like, yeah, come on in, we will incubate you. And then I think that's when the difficult decisions started being made. Because I still remember the phone call I made to him, and as soon as he picked up the call, he started talking about how he just bought this new mattress, which is like super expensive, but it's worth the investment because it's amazing for his sleep. And I was like, yeah, okay, I need you to book a flight for tomorrow and come to the Netherlands. So he literally was never able to sleep on that mattress that he bought, which was like incredibly expensive mattress. And yeah, when he moved here, he had to sell that.
The incubation, I guess that was like the normal startup process there.
Yeah. So the incubation was very helpful because we were two immigrant founders, to know a lot about the way stuff goes on here. So I think that way it was very helpful to know, or at least to have some sort of a guidance into, okay, here's how you incorporate a company, here's how you pay taxes, and I think those basics that people don't really talk about. I think that way it was very, very helpful to have some sort of ecosystem here to help you with those early stuff. And I think then slowly we just started to get into kind of it. So it's just two of us with a laptop. We will be working from all over the place, just trying to build the first version of the app that we can put out and then slowly start to monetize it. We took a loan because we couldn't pay ourselves our salaries as of yet. I think those are the kind of things that being in an incubator was very helpful for us.
With the app prototype, were you like waiting for like the perfect version before releasing it, or did you just put it out there and like started working on top of it?
I think we were trying to perfect it a bit in the beginning, but we also I think were aware that we should not wait for it to be too perfect, because they say if it's too perfect at launch, then it's too late. So we were very okay with launching it pretty early on, even if it's very uncooked. And I think in hindsight, I think it was a good decision that we launched it when it was uncooked, because then the users were able to offer us very good feedback early on and steer the app in like a direction that it just sort of often needed to go, because it's very different when you're getting your feedback from 15 people, which is what I was talking to when I was building the app here. But then when you put the app out, it's overnight like 1,000 people, and then you are actually able to then it becomes a bit more objective, the kind of stuff that people are asking for. So if then you can actually see, it's not just in their asks, it's also in their actions as to which functions are they could be actually sort of are using a lot more. So I think those decisions become a lot more objective when you actually launch, and I think that's something that I'm happy with it. And I think the other thing is that we also put the subscription in the app pretty early on. So just within a couple of months, we were also very uncertain if the app is at a point where people are okay to pay for it, because that's the very difficult question to know, is this an app people are going to pay for, and if yes, how much? So we just put a price tag and we put it out, and then very surprised that within the first 2 hours we had over 100 subscribers. So I think in hindsight now those feel like really good decisions, but at that time it was like a nerve-wracking decision because we were very, very uncertain.
And then another cool thing happened. You went to the US.
Yeah, it was very out of the blue actually. So we launched our Android app because as soon as we had our iOS app and it started blowing up a bit amongst the blind visually impaired users, a bunch of Android people like, hey, what about us? We didn't have the bandwidth to build for Android because it was Karan building the app all from himself by scratch. So we hired a bunch of interns and we were like, okay, can you build like an Android app for us? And there was so many struggles in building that Android app because that's a whole another like rant on how you're developing on Android is a nightmare. But yeah, we just sort of went through all of that, and then we did launch our Android app somehow by the end of that year, and then that started to actually have a lot of traction. And then all of a sudden we got a nomination for the Google Play Award for the best accessibility app. And that's when we figured out that a bunch of blind people who are working at Google have been like using our app very actively, and they have been the ones who have been internally advocating about our app. So when we got nominated, we were not sure if we'll actually win it because we were very excited just because of the nomination. But then they offered to sort of fly you out to their office in California and doing the Google I/O. They have like a big award ceremony and stuff, and we were able to sort of win the Google Play Award. So that was for us a very legit kind of like moment, right? Because you're building app, you're getting subscribers, but then getting a recognition from Google that okay, you guys are actually doing something good. For us, that was a very big sort of validation point, saying that okay, we are probably on the right path. But I think the bigger and the more interesting aspect was that they were now willing to open up a lot more of of doors for us internally at like Google. And I think the most helpful one was one which was with the team working on the glass. Because the whole smart glasses thing has been a very fascinating topic for us as well. Ever since we launched the app, people like one of the early feedbacks is like, can I sort of like use it without having to hold a phone in my hand? Can you put it on like wearable cameras and stuff? So I think that's been something that people have always asked us. But yeah, like we were very sure early on that we don't want to start developing our own hardware because like hardware is hard, and I don't have expertise. He doesn't have expertise, and we just didn't want to make a like capital intensive effort into building smart glasses. Especially since I knew that smart glasses, and I strongly believe that they're going to become a ubiquitous thing pretty soon. So I didn't see a point in us making our own smart glass. But then we immediately started to order smart glasses from everybody else who was making it. So every month we'll order one, do a feasibility study on it, and we'll make a decision whether this is a smart glass that can actually have Envision software in it or not. And it wasn't always just a technical feasibility. So of course that was the super important that it actually has a processor that is strong enough to do all the AI operations that we want to do. But it was also like a feasibility from an end user standpoint, where a blind person is not feeling stigmatized when they have these glasses on their face and they're out and they're out and about. like it shouldn't make them feel like an alien or like a robot or something. So that was like a hard combination to find, like a processor that's good, but also it shouldn't be big and bulky because of the processor in there. And we're really struggling with it. So the whole Google thing was very opportune for us at that point, because then they introduced us to the Google Glass team and they said, hey, there's going to be a second edition of the Glass. And then for us that was very fascinating, and they offered us early access to that, and they gave us a prototype saying that, yeah, here's a prototype, you can do your feasibility to see if it works. And when we did that feasibility, we were able to do all the processing power stuff that we wanted to do on the glasses, but also the form factor of the glasses were in a way where it was not too stigmatizing for a blind person to actually have it on their face. So we had that combination, and then we sort of struck a partnership with them, where we will purchase their hardware and we flash it entirely with our software, and then we offer that as a product to end users as a product of Envision.
How much of it was luck, you think?
Yeah, I think a big chunk of it is luck. Especially like like in hindsight, it always sort of also feels like you were at the right time at the right place, and that's how things happen. I think there is of course a big aspect of sort of like luck in any success story, I think. But I think but you have to something that I strongly believe, that you need to be lucky to be successful, but you have to be prepared for the luck. Like we already had to put in the effort into building that Android app without expectation of anything for us to be lucky enough to come to a point where Google was building a second edition of the Glass and we were invited for it. So if we didn't put in that effort in building that Android app and all of that, I think that wouldn't have happened. So I think it's of course it's about being at the right place at the right time, but also being prepared for when the opportunity is like knocking at the door. You're sort of out there to open the door and be like, yeah, let's go.
And then fast forwarding to more recent times, from there it went well. You were developing more, you started hiring more people, got the funding, etc., things like that. And maybe more about the team part, I think, as well, because you have still growing, pretty large team, and it's still growing, and it's like also located internationally and things like that. But what I see is like you have pretty good culture in the team.
I think that's the part. I think that's the part I know the least about, because everything else I think I've had some experience with. I have experience with how to design things, how to build things, how to put it out. I think those are the kind of things that I have, but how to manage a team is something that I've never done, or at least a team of like this scale, or a business of this scale. So it's pretty much a learning sort of process, even for me, and I think it will be always, because for me it's every time, like the more the team increases, it's always going to be something that I always have to like learn on how to sort of like evolve the management style to fit the needs of the team at that point. So I think that's something that I'm still coming to terms with, because I genuinely believe that's not my forte. That's not really what I think I'm the best at, managing people. I don't think that is true, and I don't think that'll ever be true. But I think it was something I read very interesting somewhere, I forgot who it was for, but it said that the best manager are people who don't want to be a manager, which I believe is very true, because I think if you are setting out with the intention of being a manager, I think you do tend to focus a lot more on the management part. But if you are just being like, okay, I don't want to be a manager, but I am right now the best person to manage this team, then you're a lot more focused on the goal and the place you want the team to be at, which I think is the like the difference. So yeah, like I've never actively like looked into how to manage people, or how what kind of a team that we want to build. I think it's been very organic, because I think we have been very much sticking to like the basics, or first principles of how to run a company. We don't overly complicate things. We don't put like processes in place. We just stick to very basic sort of fundamental things that I believe like should be the way things should be done. Like You don't have to be a dick, for example. That's like the thing. Like, don't do anything that you don't want being awfully done to you. And there has been a transparency has been a big thing in the culture. So we're always very upfront and open about how are we doing on the business side, how are we doing on the investment side, and like what can they expect in the coming months, what is not going well in the coming months. I think that kind of transparency is something that we always sort of like want to encourage, and then it becomes a two-way thing where I can be very honest about feedback to anybody in the company. If somebody is not doing a good job, we can sort of have that kind of conversation very upfront. And it can also work the other way around, where if anybody thinks I'm not doing a good job or I did something that shouldn't have been done, they always feel that they can always approach me and always inform me of that as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of a two-way sort of, or transparency is something that I'm trying to build, but which I'm not sure if that's the best way to run a company, because that's just the way that I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. But it might come to bite me in the ass at some point. But yeah, so far I think that's my approach. Just sort of to keep things simple. Mm-hmm. If it feels right, do it. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
How would you describe the future of Envision in 10 years?
When you're building your dreams, you definitely gotta build very ambitious dreams. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that I strongly believe in. So I think the idea of where Envision will be in sort of after 10 years, I definitely see it as the software that's underneath all the cameras sort of around the world. I think we can be the pioneers in building the state-of-the-art AI technology that can get any kind of information from images and have it be applied in meaningful ways. Mm-hmm. And especially if stuff like smart glasses and your wearable cameras become a ubiquitous thing, which I strongly believe will. I think then our AI being the sort of layer inside of all of these that can actually extract information from everything that's around you, mm-hmm. and be able to offer them to you in a meaningful way, so that it's no longer just enabling your vision, but it's also enhancing your vision, where you can actually do a lot more than you otherwise are able to do. So it's actually able to enhance your capability as a human being. Mm-hmm. I think that's where I see Envision as. So it's the OS for all the cameras around the world.
What kind of advice you would give to any aspiring entrepreneurs?
Do things instead of not doing them. I think that's a very, because most people I talk to, they all are always on the edge, but then very afraid to sort of take the leap that they need to take. And I think those are the kind of people that I really feel like just going and giving them a nudge and figure things out. Like, you can spend hours and hours on sort of deciding what's the best way to do something, and then because that's what I relate to, right? Like, there's always an excuse not to do something. So I really want people to do things, and then instead of just thinking about them. I think that kind of like a nudge is very, very difficult to find. But if you think you want to start a company, or if you think you need to do something about your company to take it to the next level, you should just do it instead of hours thinking about it. Like, if it feels right in your gut, then it's probably going to be right. And even if it's not, at least you sort of did it, instead of you're being like a 90-year-old person and you're thinking, if I would have done it, what would have happened? So at least you don't have a regret at the end of it. So that's what I would probably want.
Thanks for tuning in. More episodes are on the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, TNRI out.